Okay, I'm supposed to have a partner standing out here with me. I'm not sure where they is. So while I'm waiting for them to come through, I just want to welcome everybody. I'm Gloria Partita, and I am the executive director for the Davis Phoenix Coalition. And we are so glad to see you here with us for this conversation. I want to acknowledge that we are on Native land here. I don't have a formal land acknowledgement, but I think it's really important for us to recognize that we are on Native land here. And where's Sandra? There he is. Okay. So the Davis Phoenix Coalition, for those of you that don't know, we do a lot of work around diversity and inclusion. I think the work that we're most known for is to support the LGBT community. We are the only nonprofit in Yolo County that does this work. And so we're super proud of the fact that we've been doing this now for more than 10 years. But I think what people don't know is that we lift up all vulnerable populations in our community. We do anti-bullying work. Right now we have a group of leadership for women who speak Spanish, and they've been really impressive. They've been showing up for strategic planning with DJUSD. We're teaching them how to make public comment, which is really something I am really mixed feelings about. But they've really taken off. And so we do a lot of other work in the community. And what we love to do is we love to partner with other folks who are also doing this work, because you've got to amplify your activism. And if you are connected to a group that you'd like some help getting your message out or just putting on an event, we are here. We do most of the vigils that we've seen over the last 10 years have been our vigils. And we've helped other smaller groups put on their vigils. This is Andre Nelson, and he is the director of our Pride Festival, which is coming up.
One thing I want to add, thank you, Gloria. One thing I want to add about our Pride Festival is this is our 10th anniversary. We're very excited. I know you probably heard the story, but I remember when Gloria and I said, let's do it. Let's actually do this event. We were hoping 50 people would show up, and I think we got like 500 people. And last year we estimated we probably got about 6,000, 6,500. All from the support of you guys. And I'm going to say we are a pride that's on the map. Davis is on the map, period. There are large, big-name artists that are calling us to be a part of our event. And unfortunately, our little budget can't handle, I would love to have Shaka Khan come out. We just don't have $50,000. So, eventually, maybe in 20 years, Shaka Khan will be here. We are excited. Thank you to everybody in this room that has helped grow not only Davis Pride, but definitely DPC. I was watching the video. I was reminiscing with somebody. The last time I was here is when we showed Davisville.
Yes.
Those of you who don't know, Davisville is the story of how DPC, the incident we call it, and how DPC really got started. And 13 years later, I think I still cry, thinking about it. So like it was yesterday. So thank you everybody for helping support DPC and growing to what we have become in the 13, 14 years.
And for the other thing I want to add about our Pride Festival is that it is free, and we're one of the few Pride festivals that it's free, still grassroots, still not, we're not a corporate pride, and we're very proud of that. Now we'll let our speakers introduce themselves, and usually no introduction.
Oh, my voice is much louder. Okay. Welcome, everyone. Thank you so much for joining us this evening for this really important conversation. Thanks to Gloria and Sandre for letting you all know who we are and what we do. I'm really pleased that we were able to bring our speaker here this evening. This is a very urgent and relevant topic for our community at this time. Just really quickly, I want to thank everyone at Best Memorial for all their help this evening, and we are also being recorded this evening by Davis Media Access, and we're really grateful to them. This conversation will be available on YouTube later, so for those who aren't able to join us, for folks who are not local, but who also need this information, we wanted to make that available for them. So, without further ado, our guest this evening is Kathleen Quillian. She is a reporter, producer, and podcast host. She grew up in Atlanta, Georgia, so she's a long way from home, where she caught the audio bug early. Her mom would make her listen to This American Life on the way to soccer practice, which I think some of us can relate to. And she fell in love with audio storytelling at a young age. There, she worked in Georgia Public Broadcasting and the NPR affiliate WABE. She worked as a general assignment reporter covering local elections and Atlanta's rising homelessness crisis. After college, she moved to the Bay Area to pursue her second love, documentary film. She has produced alongside some of San Francisco's most notable female documentary producers, covering issues from California's high recidivism. This is such a hard word to say. I should have just rehearsed it. Recidivism. You know what I mean. I'm nervous. To U.S. and Japan diplomacy through a shared love of baseball. But the audio world was calling her name again, so she went to produce and edit for San Francisco's NPR affiliate, KQED. There she helped produce the California Report and long-form stories for Morning Edition. So after years of audio experience, Kathleen was brought on by Bloomberg News as a senior podcast producer to help assist the print reporters transition to podcasting. And that is where her deep dive into far-right politics started. Kathleen now consults and produces for newsrooms and independent podcasts. She is the mom of 2 young boys, which is amazing that she's here, and currently lives and works in San Francisco. Please welcome Kathleen Quillian. Just thank you. This is not a very formal event this evening.
No, we're hanging out. We're here to chat.
Yeah. So welcome to Davis.
Thank you. Thank you guys so much for having me. This is surreal. I think that a lot of reporters and podcasters were usually like in a dark room under like a closet. We don't usually get out much into the world and hear people that or meet people that have listened to our work or are fascinated. So it's just it's a real honor that put a lot of love and time and questionable search history into projects like this that to come into communities. It's an honor. So thank you guys. Really appreciate it.
Well, we're so excited that I heard you on KQED a couple of weeks ago, and now you're here. So, jumping right into it, for those who have not listened to the Bedrock USA podcast, can you give us a brief description of its focus and what it covers?
Yeah, so Bedrock USA, we delve deep into 2 small local towns here in the U.S. One is Sequim, Washington, and the other is Redding, so Shasta County, California. And we cover how political extremism really started to make inroads into local government. And we saw this early in the pandemic and then especially after January 6th. And so first it started with the mayor of Swim, Washington, being an avid and open supporter of QAnon, and then ousting a beloved city worker, and it kind of just alarm bells for that community. It was a very nerve-wracking time. It made national headlines, but our host and reporter at Bloomberg, Laura Bliss, went to Swim and met the people there fighting against this, and just, it deserved more time. And so that's where we really started Bedrock USA, and then more news started to unfold, and especially in California, in Shasta County, we had explosive city council meetings and trying to recall supervisors, firing health department executives. And I mean, it was basically episodes out of Parks and Recreation, but like not funny because it was real life. But so we decided that we had to, you know, really do a deep dive into both these towns and see what's happening. And I think also it's interesting, I am from Atlanta, Georgia, I am from the South, and I feel like I do get this bubble of this like safe community of living in San Francisco. We forget that these ideologies and these fringe theories can creep in anywhere, and especially during this time of the pandemic and loneliness and fear. And yeah, so we decided that what I love about podcasts, and I don't know if you guys love about podcasts, but you can just take the time to meet the people, get on the ground, hear the voices, because we heard a lot of like this salacious QAnon mayor, Shasta County militiamen, we heard that, but we wanted to go there and meet everyone. And so we really did that through Bedrock USA, and it was a privilege to be able to do that, and at times scary. So, yeah.
As a part of the folks who are on the ground and often pushing back, I really appreciate that because it is a lot of news reporting will focus on those kind of hot spots and not really dig into what's happening within the community. And so that's something that I appreciate about Bedrock USA, is giving that attention that a lot of people don't often see. And it did really strike me, this parallels between, you know, Swim, Washington, and Shasta County, which is a much redder county than ours.
Right.
And yet there's still such strong parallels and a very similar playbook that's being run in all of these different locations.
Oh, definitely.
Yeah. So, so what was kind of the impetus behind the development of Bedrock USA, and then how did that kind of bring your attention to Bridget Ziegler and Monster Liberty?
So what started Bedrock USA was really our amazing Bloomberg City Lab reporter, Laura Bliss. So she is one of the reporters who, many reporters who went to Swim, Washington or wrote about it, she went there on the ground for her first print article. And then I think we brought it to their audio team, and they're like, hey, maybe this can be a podcast. And so they brought me in to help with the production, the storytelling, because writing for the ear is very different than in print. And also I worked on all aspects of gathering that sound and the characters, and we really just worked as an amazing production team. It's quite a learning curve to do a investigative narrative podcast. It is a lot of labor of love. And they kind of just threw us together, and we had an incredible team of women, which is snaps, because usually that does not happen in the production industry. It's lovely, just a lot of hardworking women. And so it started with just Swim, and then it led to Shasta County, and that really just, because that just blew up. We couldn't leave Shasta County alone. And so that was our full season, about like 8 episodes. And then we were still needed to deliver extra episodes and like bonus content. And Laura Bliss got this amazing fellowship at MIT in the middle of production. So amazing for Laura, not great for me, and our supervising producer, because we're like, oh no, we have to complete this show. And we didn't just want to do a Q&A, and we didn't just want to do something that is easy, so we chose something very hard. And we chose the education beat because when we were on the ground, in Shasta especially, this is when we first started to hear this term of the mama bear, the don't mess with the mama bear. Like, they're trying to mask my children, how could they? And the interesting thing too is the majority of these mama bears who were furious about their children who were being masked, most of them were not being masked, and most of those children were not in public school, most of them had already been pulled out. But we started to hear this inkling of Moms for Liberty, these groups coming together, and so then I was like, I looked to see that story, co-hosted the miniseries School Board Queen about Bridget Ziegler, and I just looked at her and I said, we have to do something in this realm. And so we looked into Moms for Liberty, and I stumbled upon Bridget Ziegler's official website. I mean, I never heard of her before, and I was captivated. I wanted to meet her. Her page was just riddled with buzzwords like indoctrination, no CRT, keep gender ideology out of our classrooms, and she also, her family looked like they were out of like a Lily Pulitzer or like a J. Crew catalog, and this woman looks like she did it all. And I reached out to her, and she said that we could come hang out with her. And I think Samantha and I were very surprised, because a huge reason too why we wanted to talk to Bridget is because she had been a regular guest on Fox News, and she had been a regular profile on Breitbart, extremely conservative publications. I guest on Rush Limbaugh. But I want to know why she does what she does. Mm-hmm. I want to get to know her. I want to see her day to day. And not many other publications were doing that. Not many were pushing back on her, asking about why she thinks this way, how she got there. And so we were just amazed that she said yes. We were on the next plane. I flew from California, Samantha from New York, to Sarasota, Florida, and that was a time.
Before we go on, I just want to point out, it's so fascinating to me that, we're talking about mama bears, and when we talk about Moms for Liberty, they are really leaning into this image of them being moms, even though in reality, a lot of the folks who belong to Moms for Liberty are not in fact mothers, or they don't have children in the school system. Some of them are not women, and and so they are kind of presenting themselves as like the voice of mothers. And you're a mom.
Yeah.
I'm a parent of 2 kids as well, and so we have this kind of contrast of like who is presented as the voice of mothers, and then when we are speaking, somehow we don't have that same kind of moral authority. So that's really fascinating to me. But so I'm very, I think you got to Bridget right at the right time, because it seems to me that if you got to her a little later, she probably wouldn't have accepted.
She does not return my calls.
Yes.
She does not return my calls.
So why did you back? Can you talk about how Bridget got pulled into being on the school board in the first place, and what was her life before, and then how did she end up getting kind of pulled into this role where she ends up being on Rush Limbaugh and Fox News?
Oh yeah, I mean, this is a huge reason why I wanted to meet Bridget, because she has no background in education. She has no college degree. She bebopped around other colleges around the state and studied business, and then she started her career in high fashion. I mean, she worked for sales in Gucci for like almost 7 to 8 years. And from her background, she's constantly working, always at a job, always learning something new. And then her family moved to Florida, and she said, and their family was like, hey, you should come down to Florida. And there she transitioned out of high fashion because it's too cutthroat, and then she went to insurance sales. And then she met her husband, Christian Ziegler, at a party. And he was wearing mattress plaid. He was, in her words, the epitome of a frat boy in Florida. She thought it was hilarious. They hit it off. And they got married rather quickly. They were pretty inseparable. Their first date was at a GOP committee hearing or meeting. So it was pretty early on that Christian was the political junkie and Bridget was not. And so Bridget was still working insurance sales, and they had just recently had their first daughter. I think she was like 8 months old, and one evening, Christian comes home and looks to Bridget and says, "You're running for school board. There's a vacant seat. I think you'd be great. Run for it. Or file the paperwork to be appointed." And she looks at him like, "You're crazy. You're insane. You'll rip me apart. Who am I to be on the school board?" And her family told her not to do it. Her friends told her not to do it because she would be opening up her life to public scrutiny. Some foreshadowing there. So he was the driving force that came to her and said to do it.
And his position at that time
Was just a committeeman.
okay.
And so he wasn't, that was early 2014, he wasn't vice chair of the Florida GOP just yet, but he was working his way up. And so but he was very much involved in Florida Republican politics. And so Bridget, who's working full-time, selling insurance, very demanding job, very high up in the ranks, also a mother to an 8-month-old, and then her husband comes home and tells her that you should do this. And she did. And she filed the paperwork, and then a month later, at the time, Governor Rick Scott called her and told her to meet him at his airplane hangar. This is according to Bridget. And they had a chat. He said that he loved that she was anti-establishment. He loved that she was an outsider. And he loved that she was a mom. So I think early on, she encapsulated the mama bear. I'm a mom. I'm fighting for my children. And also, sorry, to go back, Christian also mentioned that he knows how long it takes for politics to work and local government to work. And why not have a say in our children's education? Why not be a policymaker? Why not be, how more involved can you be in your children's education if you're on board? So that was a huge driving force. And so, yeah, Governor Rick Scott appointed her, and then later she did have to run, and she won. She won, but it was a very close margin that she won by. So, and she was on the board since 2014.
Wow. So we have Bridget, who has no background in education, which we have some parallels here. She served as school board member in Yale County. But her husband is part of the GOP kind of machinery in Florida. We have a meeting with the governor in an airplane hangar, which is, I think, something not many of us have experienced. And then so she's appointed to the school board, and then she has to run for the seat, and then just barely ekes out a win from there. And it sounds like the plot, like the plan from the beginning, is for Bridget to be able to shape the education that her 8-month-old child will eventually enter into.
Yes.
Yeah. And so where is this in the timeline? When, how long ago was this that she started to run for?
So that was 2014, and so she had a lot of conservative thoughts and pushing and about school safety, but nothing as extreme as to what we know about her today or like what her platform is with Moms for Liberty. So that first day, she said that she walked into the school board room that it was like out of the Mean Girls movie. She felt like she was looked down upon. She felt like people weren't professional towards her, but that made her want to fight even harder. That's also like, I think she's a very complex woman, and I was fascinated by her because she's like, okay, you don't think I'm gonna win? I'll run, I'll win. Oh, you don't think that I'm gonna stay on the board? I'll show you, I'm gonna stay on the board. So it's like, she's very hard working, and a full-time mom, and still working in insurance. She's very involved. And so moving up a few years, we're into like 2020, and this is where things start to go how we know them today. And so
Before we get into that, can you just describe a little bit like what the reaction was of the other school board members when she joined the school board, and how she differed, shall we say, from the other school board members?
She differed just having no experience. And then also I think a lot of them judged her because of who her husband was. I think it was like, oh, your husband told you to do this job as like a fun hobby. Like, that's not what we're here to do. We did interview a former school board member who just said that she didn't have respect for, you know, what you should do before coming on the school board. So that's a huge thing that people thought that she didn't take the role seriously enough. And then also she came on the board and she already was saying that, you know, she was very anti-school union and the training, because you're supposed to go to training of like how the school board works and how you vote and how the legislation works. And she criticized that from like off the bat. So one of the first training organizations conferences she went to, she said it was just littered with her own agenda. And so she started her own board. So she started her own conservative board called the Florida Coalition Board. Sorry, I'm a notes gal. I have many notes because I want to get things right. But yeah, so in 2015, she helped co-found the Florida Coalition of School Board Members, because she basically was talking to other conservative board members and was like, hey, do you think this is not right? We should band together. So it was in 2015 that she was already creating these organizations of like-minded board members.
Right, so almost like a parallel,
Yeah.
alternate institution.
Yeah, like immediately though. Like,
Wow.
so she's already kind of like testing the waters of like, I wonder if people think like me. And then it was up until 2020 when we were in the pandemic, and that's when she realized that, wow, I know a lot of people that think like me.
Mhm, mhm. Okay, so maybe talk a little bit about how Rick Scott and this whole idea of parental rights, like how those things come together.
So I think like the parental rights, which we'll go back, because we go back in history of how this repeats itself, like parental rights has been around for like over 100 years, and this idea that you should have complete control over what your children learn as a parent. But I think this is definitely with Bridget and the pandemic and everything that just came with the mess of the pandemic and education, the online learning, the masking of children, the not knowing if your child would be safe, not having a child care. I mean, just like what a terrible time to be a parent, to be an educator. And she just capitalized off of wanting to keep her children safe. And I mean, don't we all? I guess don't we all? Were we all scared during the pandemic? And like this is what we also heard in Bedrock USA, and also hearing these public comments of just furious about these mandates and saying this is where the term of like parental rights comes into play with the pandemic. And then they start to tie in later down the line with what we're saying now about trying to ban certain books, but this and like LGBTQ plus teachings, and what we started with the pandemic as a catalyst. And if anything gets parents or people riled up, it's the fear for the safety of your children. So she used that.
Right. So we start from a place of worrying about physical safety of children, but then I think one of the things you had said in the podcast is that, you know, they're staying home, and then they're also being involved in their kids' learning, because the learning is happening online and the parents are actually present.
Right.
And so then it transitions to this new idea of, well, we have to protect the children, not just from this virus, but from the public school curriculum.
Right, right. And so the first threat to her that went viral, and really what, you know, was images for Moms for Liberty, was a Brain Pup video, which I don't know if you guys have Brain Pup, it's an amazing educational source for elementary or like K through 12 children for educational videos, and it was an explainer video about the murder of George Floyd. And she posted this video on Facebook saying, just appalled, and tagged the superintendent, Sarasota, and said how, you know, this is pro-Black Lives Matter, this is pro-defunding the police, how can we let our children watch this, this is propaganda. And so that story and her posting that actually went national. And she thought she'd walk into the board that day and be called a racist, and she thought she'd be called terrible names, but she wasn't. She was met with parents who thanked her for bringing it to their attention. They thank God their children didn't watch the video, and how could The teachers let this be passed around to school-age children, and it's the parents' choice. It is the parents' choice, parental rights, that I say, as a parent, what my child gets to watch. But this video was never shown in school. It was never assigned, and there's a disclaimer at the beginning of the video to watch it with a parent.
So it actually advocates for parental involvement
Exactly.
within the video itself.
Exactly.
Wow.
Yeah. And not once does it say defund the government, or defund the police, or pro any kind of movement. It is an explainer video for
Right.
children, for young children.
And I think we see this a lot where it starts with this one provocative event
Right.
that then almost develops a narrative of its own, like is it as they discuss it, and then as it goes out into this public sphere, and especially out to these like-minded conservative parents, that then the narrative kind of builds in this game of telephone almost, where it gets
which
more
is
radical.
social media, like the most extreme game of telephone, and a very fast game of telephone. And so that's what happened. And so it's also was, so one of the founders, Tina Deskovich, her and Richard knew each other from that Florida Coalition Board, which Bridget started.
Right.
Because she did not like how the training was going already, and she went to Tina, and she said that we should start this organization. We should start this Moms for Liberty. And then she met Tiffany Justice, and yeah, the ball got rolling. And so I think 2020 they were talking about it, and then 2021 is when they filed the paperwork for organization. Moms for Liberty was born. And these are, Tiffany and Tina are former board members. They lost their seats. So they had a lot of time on their hands. But they still wanted to be involved in this fight, in this serious fight for education. I mean, they say that they're fighting for liberty. They're fighting for U.S. liberty.
Fighting for a very selective liberty.
So I think Bridget was only involved for 3 months. And then she exited. They were still on good terms, but she just basically had too much on her plate at the time. I mean, full-time mom. At that time, she had 3 girls, and then she was on the school board, and she was still working in insurance at this time in 2020. So she's not on their website, and they don't say, like, on their official profile, it says founded by 2 moms. But Bridget very much was a founder, and I think they, especially now, skirt it under the rug a little bit. But yeah, Bridget is one of the founding 3.
Right. So, let's see. So, we talked a little bit about how we started the pandemic, and then it got to schools and specifically curriculum, and it actually started with pushing back against Black Lives Matter. So then how did we end up getting to this place of keeping LGBTQ plus identities out of schools and into legislation like the Don't Say Gay bill, which, to my understanding, Bridget was actually involved in that process.
Oh, yes, she was she became very close with Governor Ron DeSantis, and she was, standing behind him when that bill was signed, and is very proud of championing the language for the Florida Parental Rights Act. And it's her claim to fame. If you go on her website, she has audio quotes from Governor Ron DeSantis in his face on the front page. She's very proud of working at the ranks in that kind of relationship. And I think, searching and going on a deep dive of these far-right ideologies, they hold on to fear, onto language, onto the unknown, the uncomfortable for the norm. Mm-hmm. And they run with that. And they saw the attention that they got from the pandemic and the mask mandates. And now it just became pushing back against all kinds of aspects that make people feel uncomfortable. And I think that social media played a huge part in that. Mm-hmm. And I think that, once the pandemic outrage died down,
I mean, especially in Florida, there weren't that many, there weren't that many mandates, and it wasn't that, nothing like here in California, especially compared to, places like, even in Shasta County anymore. But anyway, it definitely transitioned into, just everything that the far right is uncomfortable with.
Mm-hmm. So maybe this is a good point to then talk about, like, since we are delving into this question of the far right and some of these currents that were pre-existing, and then how Monster Liberty kind of hooked into that, can we talk a little bit about the second episode of the School Board Queen series, which talks about a previous movement that was very similar to this from the 1950s.
Oh, yeah. So we talked to several amazing historians for Bedrock USA. One of the historians is Michelle Nickerson, and she is the author of Mothers and Conservatism in Post-War Right. And so for her dissertation, she went to Southern California in Pasadena, and she talked to and interviewed all of these conservative fathers. And a majority of them were very, very upset about the possibility of mental health entering their children's schools. And mental health was very new at the time, but it really was just to help men from war deal with their trauma. And but the idea that it could ever enter a child in school is very, very scary. Again, the unknown, it's scary. And so they actually, one of their main leaders of the conservative movement was Jane Crosby. She became huge in the John Birch Society, which, if you know anything about the John Birch Society, it basically has many parallels to QAnon and conspiracy theories. So they were known for being in opposition to the civil rights movement and very anti-Semitic, and its willingness to harass and intimidate its political enemies and spreading conspiracy theories. And it was really heavy in thinking that everything was communistic. So they thought the civil rights movement was just a communistic plot. And they were also very much against, so it was mental health, and then also crusading against the teaching of sex ed in schools and just other conspiracy theories about like putting fluoride in the water, because I think it sounds like similar conspiracy theories we're hearing today. And it was founded by Robert Welch in 1958, and it was like wealthy conservatives, which is also very similar to Monster Liberty, which has a ton of wealthy conservatives backing it, donating it. And so yeah, we see this in history repeating itself. In the 20s, it was evolution, and it was trying to have laws passed to not teach evolution.
Right.
And we can just go back further and further and further. There's always going to be something. It's just how we fight it does seem to be a little bit different. But we've had, especially women who organize, because Michelle Nickerson interviewed Jane Crosby for her dissertation, and she goes back and she's like, why did you do this? Why were you so adamant? And she thought that, she wanted to take over the PTA, she thought the PTA had her own agenda, and she said, well, my husband didn't have time. Like, of course I got together, I did the letter writing campaign. Like, the men didn't have time to do it. And so, of course, I got my friends together, and we did it. We as the moms took care of our children. We took them out of those schools. And, we brought that to everyone's attention. And so, yeah.
Yeah, so I'm fascinated by this consistency of, education being the realm of children, and therefore that being under the authority of moms.
Mm-hmm.
And so in the 1950s, we have this, it's this interesting kind of domestic facet of like the Red Scare and the Lavender Scare. And so the idea that, obviously public schools have, in a sense, like a socialist basis to them, because it is the state that's providing education for all children for free. And so you could kind of make this communistic leap.
Yeah.
But it's fascinating to me that you have, there's communism, then you have, the civil rights is communism, and then this whole idea of communism is therefore brainwashing, and therefore mental health is somehow associated with brainwashing. And then today, one of the more surprising things that Moms for Liberty opposes to me is that they oppose social emotional learning in our schools. And so this kind of assumption that these ways to actually support children's mental health is somehow indoctrination, which was one of the buzzwords you said that Bridget uses on her website.
Right.
And I do see this, in the 1920s, you had this advancement of rights, which then led to a backlash.
Right.
So if that is the backlash that you're seeing for the 1950s in terms of communism and the Red Scare, so how are the parallel backlash happening for Moms for Liberty in this moment?
I mean, for Moms for Liberty, and especially in Florida, which is where they were founded, it's where they're most successful, and passing certain legislation. And what you're seeing is they're being successful in spreading this rhetoric and this fear-mongering of especially LGBTQ plus rights, and that's what we heard from our last episode of interviewing Nico. So we're seeing these parallels of just complete and utter fear. Fear for the students, fear for the educators, as if their job isn't hard enough. And it's interesting too, because this even goes back into the 50s, because there was a fear of mental health. And I mean, there wasn't mental health really in schools. The most there could be was guidance counselors. And it's the same fear that you're seeing today in our education system. I mean, the fear that there's CRT being taught to third graders. There's fear that my child could go to the guidance counselor and get gender reaffirming drugs, or gender transitioning drugs without my knowledge. And it's just not happening.
That's a myth. That's a myth.
But it's just crying out this fear, and I think what they're so successful about doing is that you don't even really need a law to pass to instill fear into public schools or public education. If we go back in history, historically, public schools are very moderate and conservative with their education. I mean, if you have any kind of complaint, or if a parent comes to one teacher and is like, I don't know about that book, but oh, okay, we'll take it away. There hasn't had to be laws passed or books banned, because it's hard enough having to be a public educator and superintendent and look over these schools. But historically, public education isn't indoctrinating anyone. It's just, if you look at the facts and the studies, it's just not true. But you hang on to one fear in these headlines, and also the organization of Moms for Liberty, which is also very similar to the Berkshire Society and Jane Crosby, who's women in the 50s. Is they were loud, they were organized, they know what the message was, and they weren't going to back down from it. And I feel like you're here, that's why they're successful in what they're doing today.
Right. And so there's almost this leveraging of privilege, because a lot of them are coming from this privileged position where they assume that, they must be able to have an effect and to be able to impose their will, or create these alternative institutions that will behave the way they think these institutions should. Oh no, I had a train of thought, and now
I'm throwing a lot at y'all.
You are.
It's a lot.
It is very dense. There's a lot going on.
Yeah.
Shoot. It's so frustrating when this happens.
No, you're fine. But also, I think what is hard about Moms for Liberty, and what I try to answer and what I've tried to research as a reporter and producer and understand their fight, and the same with the fight for mothers in the 50s and the 20s, is you hear their slogan of, we don't co-parent with the government, parental rights, I should have complete control. And they're saying that parents have complete control, and that's great, but they think that they have the right to tell how I should parent, how you should parent. And that's where I need to do more research. I don't know. I need to go in the field more. But it seems like, because you asked me that question before, and I don't know how to answer it.
Right, this is a kind of double
Right.
standard of, well, our parental rights matter, but
Right.
parents who disagree with us, their parental rights don't matter.
Right.
Right.
Because they're saying like, oh, well, you can teach that to your child in like under your own roof in your own time. But it's like, why do you? So that's what people have asked me in my reporting and asked us. And I don't know. We've sat down with Bridget and we've asked her the same thing over and over because we said, like, can you imagine how these parents feel, how these students feel? And it seems like just again they have this history of dodging the question and just like hitting you with like other facts and how the reading rate is down and if we put this much energy and effort into actually helping children read and not all of these other things so
Yeah, and that is actually something that we've encountered here where Moms for Liberty has been advocating, for example, against ethnic studies, saying that, well, our children's math scores and reading scores are not, where they should be, and so we shouldn't be wasting time on ethnic studies. Which, of course, completely ignores how things like ethnic studies make things like reading and math relevant to children who might not otherwise be engaged in school because it's not culturally relatable for them.
Right. Or makes them feel uncomfortable. And they don't want their children to be uncomfortable or feel bad or.
Right, so on one hand you have like children of color, LGBTQ plus kids who need things like ethnic studies and who need, LGBTQ plus history to be acknowledged in order to feel like they are included. And then on the other side you have, Moms for Liberty who are like, well, my children are going to be alienated if you touch on these. And like, so why don't we, and so they set up this opposition between, basic skills and ethnic studies. Whereas for other groups of children, those two things might be interrelated.
Right.
Yeah.
Definitely.
So I remembered what I was thinking of, which is, Moms for Liberty says, well, we don't parent with the government. And yet there are so many Moms for Liberty whose children are not actually in public schools or who end up homeschooling their children. And so it's fascinating to me that you have this situation where, they are trying to control what happens in public education at the same time that they're advocating for a lot of people to opt out of public education.
It's really interesting because this is what really fascinated me early on when we were reporting for Bedrock USA because when we were in Shasta County, we talked to a lot of those mama bears and we were like, what upset you? Like, what are you doing now about your children's education? And they pulled them out. And then also during a lot of Moms for Liberty has a annual summit, and during their break-off meetings, a lot of the questions, this is from other reporters, a lot of the questions were, they're doing this, X, Y, and Z in my children's school, what should I do? And a lot of the solution is to pull them out and to homeschool them. And like the safest way, to have your children at home. And that's a huge privilege to be able to homeschool your child. And then also Moms for Liberty is huge into fighting for vouchers to homeschool your children. And so, yeah, it seems like a huge solution is just to do away with it all. Just all or nothing attitude, definitely.
Right, so either public education needs to conform to the way we believe it should be.
Right.
Or we should dismantle it altogether and have kids go to private schools or have all children be homeschooled and therefore all mothers stay home.
But also their children, but like you said, a majority of those moms, those parents are still fighting. And so when we were out in the field and talking to so many people, we were interested in like, why are you fighting? Like your children aren't even in this system. And they're so impassioned and just know in their heart and their soul that they're fighting for something that is bigger than themselves, bigger than their own children. And like they just feel like Moms for Liberty is giving them this purpose and greater than themselves to fight for all of America's children. And that's what they're doing.
So when we were talking on the phone, something that we were talking about that I'd like to bring into this conversation is this idea of, part of the appeal of Moms for Liberty is moms feeling isolated and looking for some kind of community.
Yeah.
And I think we have seen that here where conservative moms are saying, well, I don't feel, you say Davis is for everyone, but it's not, you're not including me kind of thing.
Right.
And so how Moms for Liberty, like as an organization, can praise on that in a certain sense.
Oh, for sure, for sure. I think like a lot of these really super older conservative movements have done that and utilized social media that way. But also, it started with the pandemic because weren't we all isolated and lonely and scared and sick of our family and like the same person like every single day? Weren't we seeking for some kind of community?
I wasn't saying that.
Weren't we like reaching for just like, we were tired of making sourdough and so I found something. But,
If only we'd been more successful with the sourdough.
I know, we've only just stuck to sourdough. Yeah, I think that they do that so well because, man, being a parent is hard enough already. And it's just so hard, so isolating, and that time maybe even worse. And they just preyed on people who thought alike, and they just lit a fire. And I mean, we were mad, we were upset, we were afraid, and they utilized that. And these moms really band together, and it just was really fueling the fire. And they have a brilliant social media team in what they repost because they're constantly reposting from other super conservative, other organizations I didn't even know existed, people I didn't know existed, and all these people out of the woodwork, and fighting for the same kind of cause, same rhetoric. And they are like very well produced podcasts, very well produced videos, and so they're good at that. And it's appealing. And it's pretty impressive that they're able to start with just 2 chapters in Florida in 2021. And they thought that it would just stay in Florida, Moms for Liberty. And they kind of just talked amongst each other. And then I think, I'm pretty sure it was a mom from Pennsylvania and then another mom from New York who contacted Tina Jeskovich. And they were like, oh, we need this. I need this in my school. I need this community. Can I start a chapter? Can I do this? And it was interesting too because early on, it actually started with this thing called massive meetups. And so it was like a Tupperware party without the Tupperware. So it was basically, they gave you this mini pocket constitutions and you got to learn about, U.S. civics and the Constitution, and you got to have a little party with your girlfriends and your moms, and that was this really starter of bringing people together. And it's building community, it's building that village, and they're great at it.
What's funny about that to me is that I think that's what Moms for Liberty thinks that I do to recruit children, is like somehow I'm having whatever teenagers think of as a cool Tupperware party,
Right.
and that somehow
I love Tupperware.
it's like in this Tupperware is a trans identity,
Right.
and you become trans.
Right.
And so, I mean, what you're talking about could almost be described as indoctrination itself, right?
Yeah.
And so you have this, what I feel like is almost projection, where they are doing these things, and they also assume that that's what's happening on the other side.
Right.
And so they're like, well, what we're doing is not indoctrination, but you're definitely doing this thing, which is absolutely indoctrination, and it's very similar to what we're doing, but we're on the right side and you're on the wrong side.
Right, right. And then again, what they're very good at is the buzzwords. They use the term groomer a lot.
Yes.
And it's the extreme. To be called a groomer. And then on Sunday, 60 Minutes released an interview with Tina and Tiffany, and they were pushed again about using this language, which is heavily documented on all their social media. And they've been known to have their account suspended for misconduct. And it's the language of it all. And it's very powerful. And yeah, they do.
Yeah, I mean, so here, I would say our local chapter has been very careful not to use that kind of language themselves, even though their followers do. And so they can say, well, we're not using that language.
Right.
And so they're skating very close to the line of what is permissible and what isn't,
Right.
in such a way that they encourage that kind of language without using it themselves.
Right.
But I am interested in this idea of like how Moms for Liberty is leveraging both social media and these kinds of what I think of as closed circuits of right-wing media in general, not just social media, but other types of media, in order to kind of spread their message, spread their agenda, get people to start chapters. So, yeah.
Yeah, so they're extremely good at that because they've garnered such attention from very wealthy and powerful conservative institutions. So they've gotten huge donations and backing from the Leadership Institute, which was created to train conservative politicians or anything in the conservative realm in DC. I mean, they've trained Mike Pence, Mitch McConnell, I mean, big names. And they put their name as a sponsor for Moms for Liberty and also utilize all of their contacts. So that's pretty huge. And then also we have the Heritage Foundation, which is one as well that's we've seen has garnered huge attention and is a conservative think tank. And also going back to Leadership Institute, the Leadership Institute created a position just for Bridget Ziegler because she is so good. She was so good at her job and so good at being on the school board and getting her message and inspiring other moms to run for school board and spread the same kind of rhetoric that they hired her to be head of all of their training and create the training for the school boards. Wow. And she had come here to California. She had been all over. She would go to DC once a month to train other people to train other people. And then just like a domino effect. And so early on, being able to get the good side of these organizations. And also, I mean, people like Governor Ron DeSantis spoke at their national summit. We had former President Donald Trump called them the grassroots juggernaut. You had Nikki Haley speak at their previous summit. I mean, you have big names.
Right.
With a lot of conservative credibility, you're going to get your message known.
Right. Right. I'm just going to state for the record that whoever trained Obama has not trained me. If Obama's trainer would like to provide us with support in this fight, we would really appreciate that. Also, if there are deep-pocketed donors out there, in theory, I am being paid to turn kid strands. My bank account does not reflect this. I'm trying to hold down my resentment that, that people like Ziegler have access to this level of power and that they have access to this level of funding. Mm-hmm. And those of us who are tasked with trying to push back against them at the grassroots have nothing approaching that kind of support.
It's been interesting because time and time again, I've had people ask me, it's like, well, what about the other side? What about progressives? Like, why aren't we hearing more? What are the organizations there? What are the deep pockets there? And of course, there are grassroots people and there are organizations that are trying to fight against Moms for Liberty, but it is just not at the same volume. It is not at the same amount of money, which of course they are a 501c4, and so we don't get their tax filings till later. But we're just not seeing the same thing on the other side. And I do want to comment that they aren't growing nearly as fast as they were in their infancy. So let's say compared in 2022, the group endorsed about 500 candidates, and they won those seats for school board. And then now we're in, say, 2023, about only 43% of the 202 candidates won. And then also we're seeing chapters break down, a lot of scandal. And so they've been kind of their worst enemy. And I don't know what the future holds for them. But it just, I have to weigh on just the organization, the loudness, and the money. I mean, in 2022, the revenue was 2.1 million. And $1 million of that was donations from very, very wealthy conservatives. I mean, we have 50,000 from the heiress to Publix, and she was also known for backing funding for a bus up to January 6th in Florida. So we have things like that. And then also, you know, for a lot of the revenue, they said it was from t-shirt sales, which I thought was like laughable. But in 2022, they made $96,000 from t-shirt sales and merch. I'm in the wrong business.
So am I here.
I just, we have to really, really not take that lightly, of the organization, the money, and they're loud. They're loud. You hear them. They make themselves known, and just like, let's just say, like former President Donald Trump, it's very harsh, crass. It's the same.
Right. And interestingly, we have a movement that's like, we must protect our children from talk about sex and sex education and, you know, and then of course, you know, we keep running into this hypocrisy where, you know, their chosen candidate is a very crass person who uses sexual terms and boasts about sexual conquest and things like that. And then we have, you know, we might as well be explicit about it, Bridget Ziegler having, you know, sex scandals in her own life, which is, I think part of what you're saying is leading to a kind of decline for them in some places.
I mean, yeah, it's hard when you make yourself the morality police and then you slip up and you're going to fall very hard. You're going to fall very hard. And yeah, and it just, the hypocrisy of it all, I can't get out. Like,
Yes.
And so admitting to having a three-way relationship with her husband and someone else, and then her husband was being accused of rape, which is now, that charge has been lifted, and now he's being accused of video voyeurism. And that's still, I think, in the hands of a state attorney. But that's not great PR. And it's really hard to push that anti-LGBTQ plus agenda. And, you know, a student said it, the best himself, it's like they don't want her to step down from the board because she got a three-way. They want her to step down from the board because they don't like what she's doing with her job.
Mm-hmm.
So Bridget right now, you know, is no longer with the Leadership Institute. Her husband did step down because he rose to the ranks to being the head of the Florida GOP. And right now, the only one that can remove Bridget is Governor Ron DeSantis, who is Walter, who has been a very
yes,
adamant fan or huge fan of hers. So
right.
It's an interesting time for Moms for Liberty and this organization, and just like they were interviewed on 60 Minutes, and they're not giving up anytime soon.
Right.
But it definitely is not the same numbers as they were. I mean, right now they say that they're founded by two moms, and they have 300 chapters, 48 states, and 130,000 members. And but we're taking a word on that right now. So,
right. We don't know how members is defined exactly.
Exactly. So,
yeah. Well, on the local level, for example, when these scandals come up, it feels like what happens is that they ramp up their rhetoric about what is happening in schools, and, you know, for folks who are LGBTQ plus advocates, that the rhetoric about us gets ramped up, you know, certainly in terms of a distraction from what is going on with their membership. But then also, I think, in order to try to establish that oh, well, what Bridget Ziegler did was bad, but, what these folks are doing is even worse. And so how can you condemn us when, this truly evil thing is happening? So from our perspective, that seems to be one way in which they're trying to manage that.
Yeah.
But, I'm just, given that these organizations just seem to keep rising up,
Right.
that,
They're not going, I don't think they're going away anytime soon, and especially because we're in the middle of an election year. Tensions are high, who knows what's gonna happen. I don't know if from my reporting, I need to go back out into the field and see what's going on and see if there's any other things besides Moms for Liberty, which I'm sure there are, popping up, and maybe they're fighting for something else. But yeah, this isn't going away. It won't go away, and history shows it won't go away. So, yeah, these women are organized.
yes. Another thing that I really appreciated about your podcast was including the voice of a trans teen named Nico, and just his struggles as Florida was passing more and more anti-LGBTQ plus legislation. And naturally, Nico's story put me in mind of Next Benedict, whose memory we are honoring today as part of this event. So can you talk a little bit about how these laws that Moms for Liberty is pushing ends up affecting kids in these school districts and then these states as these laws go into effect?
Yeah, so Nico, we found him through Also Youth, which is an amazing program in Sarasota that supports LGBTQ plus kids, and we can find a safe place, and we reached out to them to see if anyone would be willing to talk, and we sat down with Nico and just, I don't have enough praise for Nico, and also I think that we were talking before, is that for Gen Z and the youth, we are very hard on them, and I feel like they should give us such hope in their activism and the fact that they're able to speak up in times like this. I can imagine going to public comment and fighting for their rights, and going to Governor Ron DeSantis and begging them not to do legislation like this and what it's doing to them. And so Nico attended a Sarasota public school, and even before this legislation was passed, this is what we're saying in other historians of U.S. education was saying, even before this legislation or laws like this are passed, teachers and superintendents in schools are quick to do away with any kind of curriculum or support groups before even anything is passed. So even before Governor Ron DeSantis signed this Florida Parental Rights Act, this school did away with their LGBTQ plus club. And certain books were taken off the shelves even before. It was the fear, and just the bills and the laws that are passed are just riddled with legal gobbledygook. It would take like 6 lawyers to interpret them, and that's why they're written that way. It's impossible to understand what you can and cannot do. It's very challenging. And so, as if, oh my God, high school and being a kid isn't hard enough, let's take away the support group and the safe space you have. And that's what happened. And Nico just, felt isolated and not safe. And also a huge part of this was teachers trying to understand about students who wanted to go by different pronouns or a different name. And soon those teachers started dead naming kids because they didn't know. They were fearful to lose their jobs. And so you have teachers who don't want to do something, who are, oh my gosh, your job is hard enough as an educator. Now you have these LGBTQ plus students who, are being forced to come out to their parents when they're not ready. And teachers being forced to have to tell their parents. And so it is damaging. And it creates this environment of not feeling safe. And every child should feel safe in their school. Because if we're fighting, for our children and for not the whole foundation of all of this is the safety of our children. I mean, how can you say that after what happened next? How can you say that?
Yeah.
So it has to, I mean, yeah.
Yeah, it's something that just really touched me about what Nico said. And, fortunately, we don't have this in our district because our district has very supportive policies for LGBTQ plus kids. It was just when Nico was telling one of his teachers that, his name and what pronouns he wanted to use, and the teacher said, well, I'm going to have to tell your parents.
Mm-hmm.
And Nico was not out to his parents
Mm-hmm.
at that time. And one of the things that he says in the course of the interview is that his father's not supportive of him. And just how terrified it made him feel to know that he had already told this teacher that he was trans, in essence, and that his teacher said, it was already basically a done deal that his teacher was going to out him to his parents, including his father who doesn't accept him. And that then he would put him in a position where he had to strategize how he was going to deal with that with his parents in the space of what I assume was like hours. And just how much pressure that is for a child who, I think Nico was 16 at the time you talked about.
He was 16 at the time, and I think that he was 15 when that happened.
Oh my gosh.
Yeah.
Yeah, and so to be a teen and already be in a position, I'm saying this because my kids are 13 and 15, that to already be kind of renegotiating your relationship with your parents and also being in the position of trying to find yourself, to be put in a position with that much pressure where it's something you feel deeply and also something that you're so afraid to tell your parents about. And then to be in this position where you are forced to make this choice of like, how am I going to handle this? And that personally just really broke my heart. And that's something that I find really effective about podcasts because you're hearing people in their own voices telling these stories.
Yeah.
So I really appreciated that.
We were just amazed of how open Nico was and willing to talk to us and how supportive his mom was there with him. And I think one thing that is so true, I mean, I totally agree with what Nico said in our podcast, is that no one is born with hate in their heart. It's a learned behavior. And I don't know. I think he gives us a lot of hope for our future and our generation. And it was just a really beautiful and special moment that we were able, which is another reason why I love podcasting and, doing what we do. And even after like the hours and hours of reading and deep diving into extreme conspiracy theories, and then you have like a nugget of hope like this. It's just really beautiful, and it's just the power of storytelling and what we do. But also, yeah, I do want to say too that it's a very complex issue. I feel this personally now, even more so as a parent. That we only want the safety and the best for our children. It's the hardest job I've ever had, and it's hard because as a reporter, you want to go out to the field, you want to hear both sides, you want to understand, you want to learn. And I'm not saying in our reporting that every mom for Liberty woman or member is, associated with the Proud Boys or, thinks of this LGBTQ plus like anti-rhetoric. I don't want to put them all under that umbrella and say that they associate with that. I think it's a very complex issue with a lot of layers, and it's going to be very interesting these next few years with the elections and, certain bills being passed, and especially this terrible tragedy with next. It's a really, really, really hard time. Really hard.
Yeah, and I think for all of us as parents, like the fact that so much of this playing out on the backs of children is very hard to watch.
It is very hard because every, when we see this behavior, really loud, just no decorum behavior in public comment for city council, for school board meetings, and you have the parents dragging their children to these, and it just doesn't feel like it's for them. It doesn't feel like we're fighting for them. And it's hard because each comment is for the kids, for the kids, for the kids, for my kids. I'm fighting, and you're just like, I don't know, on the backs of them.
Right. So we did put out a call for questions from the audience before this event. And the last time I checked the form, we had, essentially the questions were the same thing, which are basically, how do we fight moms for liberty? How do we, deal with this organization that's very organized, that have these deep pockets, that have these high-level ties to, Republican power. And here we are in our little town with the kind of limited resources that we have. And so how do we counter this force?
This is tricky. I don't know if I can personally tell you how to fight this organizations or
did you see anything in the communities that you were looking at?
what I did see is more attendance at these school board meetings, more involvement with reading lists with certain books that they thought were in question. They had certain parents read them and they voted on them. And it's like actually getting in your school or getting into the issues that you're concerned about and just not staying silent. If you're concerned, make your voice heard, go to the meetings, reach out to the teachers, and just really put yourself on the front lines, just like Moms for Liberty, just like these other organizations. Yes, they might be really well funded, but it's putting in the time and the work and making your voice heard. And that's what we saw. It was smaller numbers, but it's consistency. It's not giving up. That's what we saw when we were talking to other people who were trying to go against these organizations. And yeah, that's kind of what we saw. I can't tell you what I do, but that's what we saw out there.
Right. We do have a situation where some folks in the community are actually afraid to stand up because we have had situations where, educators have had bomb threats at their home and people are being put, their images and their names are being put on social media that is set to public where all and sundry can see,
Right.
and therefore get targeted by these right-wing networks that Moms for Liberty seems to be tied into. And we don't have a way to really draw a direct line of Moms for Liberty went to Libs of TikTok, which went to, out to these folks, and then we got bomb threats, or then, people received these threatening email messages or whatever. And so we are dealing with a situation also where, people are dealing with fear in terms of, if I stand up, am I going to be targeted?
Probably, yeah. Unfortunately, probably. They use doxing, they use these really intense harassment tactics. It's one of their tactics. I would say that it's interesting that their accounts, these organizations and certain chapters have been flagged, and depends on which social media platform you're on. I won't name which name, but there's one that does a little bit less policing than they used to, and so it gets hard. It definitely gets hard, and that's a very real consequence. I didn't really see in any of my research of that is a huge reason of why you're not seeing as much organization on a progressive side or another side of these extreme right ideologies and organizations. So if you guys find a good way, let me know.
So one of the things that we've been advising is that, more people who stand up, then it makes it harder to target any one person. And so that is something that we have been trying to use. And it's difficult because sadly, various people get their day, unfortunately, where they'll fasten on one person,
Right.
and that person will kind of be under scrutiny for a while, and then they'll move on to somebody else. So that is something that we're still trying to learn how to deal with as a community.
Right. And so what I've heard from other people when we've interviewed them is keeping extensive documentation of that harassment, bringing it to law enforcement, not taking it lightly. We've interviewed some parents who have pages and pages of threats, and this isn't helping. I'm hearing myself, I'm like, this doesn't sound great. But we have seen the more documentation, the more organized you are with everything, and just like power in numbers and not just trying to speak up alone is a safer bet.
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm. I think we are almost coming to the end of our time. Do we have any flexibility? Can anyone tell me?
Sorry, it's okay, it's been a while.
Yeah. Hello, voice of God. Do we have any flexibility in our timing, or do we need to wrap this up right now? Flexibility. I am being told. Okay. The grassroots have spoken. We are reclaiming our time, as it were. I'm just trying to think of a good wrap-up question here, in addition to how do we, how are we supposed to fight this? Just out of curiosity, are you planning to keep pursuing this particular vein? Is your beat essentially to continue looking at these far-right movements, and are there particular projects that you're looking ahead to?
Yeah, I think definitely, personally, I just can't drop this. It's just encompassed my life. I'm trying to go back on the ground in Florida and see who will talk to me, what other organizations are popping up. I hope to attend the Moms for Liberty National Summit, which will be this summer, which they haven't announced their speakers yet. I'm very fascinated about that. And also just keeping, what's happening here in California as well. In Davis and seeing what's going to unfold. So I thought I was going to walk away from it. I had my second baby 7 months ago, and I was like, oh, I'm done, and no, I'm not. I can't drop it. It's the mama bear in me. I'm it's an interesting time. It really is, definitely for education. And I think what I find really interesting too is that a majority of these people in these organizations, they're very anti-public school, public education. For instance, Bridget Ziegler, during COVID, pulled her children out of school that she loved the teachers, it was a magnet school, it was an A-rated school. And they did it just because of the fear for masking and mandates. And it's interesting because statistics show that a majority of Americans love their kids' schools. They love it, and they love their teacher. They think that the entire country is terrible. The education system is terrible. We're a very odd bunch as Americans. So it's a very interesting time, and especially with a national level and with the presidential race coming up. I'm very curious to see what capacity education will be brought in. It seems like it might be on the back burner before it seems more the forefront, but who knows what's going to happen. But I'm going to be front row soon.
Right. Well, thank you so much for coming. We're so appreciative. Please keep us abreast of what you work on, because
I will. If anyone has any tips, too.
well, we may have some things to pitch to you.
Yes. pitch me. And also, if you want podcast help, let me know.
So before we break up this evening, I just want to make sure that we do bring it back to the local level. We talk about what is happening here in Davis and in Yolo County as we deal with these very pressing issues. We have 2 tables out in the lobby area, one for Measure N, which is on the ballot, which is due tomorrow, folks. Please vote. So please, if you are not yet familiar with Measure N, what it does, how it's going to serve our students, please talk to the folks at that table. Also, there is a table for the recall election in Woodland, in our sister district of the Woodland Joint Unified School District. So please also inform yourself there. And we also have more ways to get involved. Please look at the Davis Coalition table and all of our activities and the ways that we are continuing to organize in order to keep all of our kids safe and keep them included in our schools, as well as the various ways that we are supporting all of our marginalized communities here in Yolo County. Again, thank you so much for coming out. Thanks to Davis Media Access. Thanks to everyone at Vets Memorial. I'm so glad that we were able to bring this event together, and I'm looking forward to being able to share it more widely as well. So have a good evening, everyone.